Today is December 11th, 2013, and my name is Leslie Lomas, and I'm interviewing Kathleen Martindale as part of a series of interviews about the volunteers at KGNU Radio. This interview is being recorded for the Maria Rogers Oral History Program and is being filmed by Anne Marie Poise. So, Kathleen, for starters, can you tell us your whole name and when and where you were born?
Oh, I'm Kathleen Elizabeth Martindale, and I was born in Harlem in New York. I was Spanish Harlem. I was born at Harlem Hospital. Mm-hmm. I'm proud of that because I survived Harlem Hospital.
Okay. And what year was that? Not to be impolite, but we like
1947.
To know for the record.
47.
And of course, also being somewhat of a New Yorker myself, my first impulse is to say, what's the address? Well, maybe tell us a little bit.
Oh, Amsterdam,
how New Yorkers always say, you know, what street and what's it between. And so talk a little bit about where that was and what it's like growing up.
143rd Street and Amsterdam Avenue, and it was sort of like the border of Harlem and Spanish Harlem. So Amsterdam Avenue sort of was the barrier. On one side it was Spanish Harlem, on the other side it was Harlem. And also known as Columbia, near the Columbia School there, Columbia University. Yeah. So sometimes it was called like the Columbia neighborhood. But,
So, because it's quite a ways geographically and culturally from Harlem to Boulder. So tell us a little bit about growing up in Harlem, and then we'll get to what the series of events that eventually led you to Boulder.
Oh. Well, thinking on it now, and at the time, I thought I had a great childhood. It was really, really wonderful to be growing up in the city. It was great to go through the New York public school system because you got to go to plays, movies, theater, museums. Everything was just sort of there, and it's a big part of what I am and what I'm interested in is all that exposure. Because my family was, we're probably lower income. We were poor. And single moms, my mom and her sister and their mother. So I grew up with my grandma, and it was surrounded by women, basically. I did have a cousin who was male, and he was like a month older than me. So
so a bit of an extended family.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And yet, you still had exposure to all these cultural benefits, or
you don't realize it until you leave home. I didn't realize it until I went off to undergraduate school, where I was surprised to be going to school with people never been to a movie theater before. I mean, I think that's really basic. But I've been to plays and museums and ballets, and at the time you couldn't really appreciate it because you were a child, and so it was just something that was there, like going to Central Park and seeing Shakespeare in the park. Mm-hmm. Who would have thought?
That you think that that's just how
it was
how it is.
Yeah, and that's what I did. Yeah. So I thought as I got older, I realized what a really sort of privileged upbringing, childhood I had. I got to experience a lot of stuff that most people wouldn't even think about.
And also, when we talked before, you mentioned a few legendary pop singers that came to your school to sing.
Well, yeah.
Tell us who it was.
I just think there's so many. Like, I remember growing up, going on a field trip, and one of the people who was on our bus, who was, you know, a teacher's aide, usually a parent. This case, it was another student's older brother, and it was Jackie Lyman and the Teenagers. He sang all the way going to the museum, and he sang all the way coming back, and it was great. Across the street there was a deli that I would go and hang out, and the aunt was, her nieces were the Ronettes. So they would be there. I could look out the window at the bar across the street and see Miles Davis going into the bar to hang out, and then he'd go across the street on the other side of Amsterdam Avenue, and he'd hang out in the piano bar in there. And that was just things that I saw. When I was in high school, I saw the dancer, ballet dancer, Rudolf Nureyev, on the street. So that's what you get for being in New York. After a while, you get used to seeing famous people, and I was always brought up to respect people's privacy. So I wasn't one of those, you know, run over, give me your autograph or start screaming in your face kind of person.
Yeah, so that's, yeah, an interesting way. Then when you go someplace else, you realize, like, oh, wow, that doesn't happen everywhere.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, and then, so you got interested in art, and decided to pursue that.
Yeah,
Talk about that a little bit.
I think growing up I was always interested in art because I would draw pictures. I made my own paper dolls. I'd construct little houses and made furniture. And being in New York, in elementary school, I had instructors who realized that, and I was directed to go and apply to go to a high school that specialized in art. So I went to the High School of Art and Design. And that's another sort of like a little blessing on my life, because where else, if I wasn't in New York, would that have happened? So I really feel privileged of being in New York at that time. I know that it's not so much like that now, it's much harder, but at that time it was a lot easier.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because a lot of times you hear a lot of negative things about the public school system and this and that and how it's not doing well enough, so it's actually nice to hear
something good. Well, I think, like you're saying, like in school, at one time we had an auditorium. Every Friday there was auditorium. One Friday, Albert and King and
Benny
King, yeah, they showed up, and the auditorium was just them sitting on the stage introducing a bunch of elementary school kids to the blues. I did, like, who are these guys? Whoever heard music like that? You know, and it's my music, and that's my introduction to the blues.
Yeah, straight from the source.
Yeah.
Also.
Yeah, things like that. That was just, at the time, I don't know if, it was something that just happened. But now as I'm older, and I think back on those things, that's just marvelous, wonderful. Yeah.
So then beginning on your journey to Boulder, So, I think you told me so that when you graduated high school, and then you went to
Kansas City Art Institute in Kansas City, Missouri.
Mm-hmm.
That was another adventure, from going from, Harlem, Manhattan, New York, Kansas City, Missouri. And
what was that like?
It was probably for me a really turning point in my life, because I think I came from a really overprotective upbringing. I wasn't allowed to do a lot of stuff. At the time, I had an opportunity to go to Woodstock. I think I was just out of high school, and I wasn't allowed. No, you can't do that. Women just don't do that in my family. And for me, going to Kansas City, Missouri was like the prison gates were open. So, and it was a different place. It was real interesting. My first sort of real introduction into bigotry, racism. My mom and her family from South Carolina, and in the summertime, I would be sent down south to spend a month down there during the summer to give my mom a break, because she was going to nursing school and working, and I wasn't the best little girl. Going to Kansas City, Missouri was like eye-opening, because it was almost the first time somebody actually called me a nigger. When I went looking for an apartment, I couldn't find a place to live. I was in Kansas City Art Institute. At the time, there were 5 black students in a school of 500, and I was the one black female. I didn't find that really discouraging, upsetting or unusual, but the reaction of some people, and it was also the time, like, I guess late 60s or 60s. I remember people crossing the street, because it wasn't so much me, but it was maybe me and some other students, and we were hippies, the first love generation. And that was just such a weird place for it to be, that there was a lot of hatred towards students at our school, because they were artists, free thinkers, and a lot of us we were hippies. And this was like a big city farm town, and they just weren't used to and didn't want to see who we were. So that was sort of hard. And I can truly say that the police department, the word pigs, and the Kansas City Police Department are synonymous.
Yeah, well, there's quite a cultural shift from Harlem and New York City to Kansas City in the 60s.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so how long were you there, and then what happened?
I went there for 4 years.
So you completed?
I completed, yeah. And then I came back to New York, and I applied and got into Pratt Institute. So I started going to Pratt, and that was going to Bedford-Stuy in Brooklyn. That's where Pratt is. And it's not really one of the best neighborhoods to be living in. But I tried commuting from Long Island to Brooklyn, and I was in the industrial design department at that time, and a lot of times I had to be on a train with a whole bunch of other people early in the morning, and I was the person there with the big model that I was trying not to have it destroyed by the crush of people. And I thought, like, you know, this is really crazy and it's not going to work. So I wound up being in the dormitory in Bedford-Stuyve at Pratt, and then I got an apartment later on. But that was another interesting, I guess, thing for me in my lifetime of going to Pratt Institute and working to become an industrial designer, which I didn't become. The education was wonderful. I wouldn't pass up my education for anything. I thought it was the greatest thing, even though I'm not an industrial designer and I don't have any desire to be one. I just thought I got an excellent education, got to meet some really right-on instructors, and it's my passion. It's my passion.
Yeah, because Pratt, I think it's a very prestigious art and design school, if I'm not mistaken.
It's also a really prestigious librarian school.
Oh.
A lot of people don't know that, but we were one of the top librarian schools in the country, probably in the world.
So did you complete your graduate degree at Pratt?
Yeah.
In industrial design?
Yeah.
Okay, and then, and then what did you do from there?
From there, then I went out and I was working at a private school at St. Anne's in Brooklyn.
Teaching or?
No, I worked for the gym department. I had friends who had gone to school with me in Kansas City, and then they had moved to New York and gone to school at Pratt also at the same time, but originally they were from Denver. And I had met some of their friends, and I was given a job offer. And at that time, it was like school had just been let out, so I was looking for another job to do during the summer. I had just gone out, I don't know what I was doing, but I was out in the street, and for the first time I was sort of like propositioned twice from going to the store and coming back, which was really upsetting. I got the phone call. They said, "Can you come out in 2 weeks?" I said, "I'm packing right now." And I moved out to Denver, Colorado. And I got a job at Neusteter's doing window display.
So something, actually down your professional alley.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and like, I was born in New York, I grew up in New York. New York is a really hard place. It's a hard place to find a place to live. It's a hard place to find a job. It's constant, especially if you're in the city part and of the whole, it's a hard life. I say, like, you can't stop any moment on the street, because if you stop, somebody's going to run up and charge you for something. You know, you got to keep moving, you got to keep going. And when I first got here to Colorado, friends would say, "I saw you on the street and I was waving at you and screaming and jumping all over, and you didn't even pay any attention to me." And it was just sort of like a New York attitude. As I was always taught growing up, is like, you don't really look anybody in the eye, and if you don't know them, you don't speak to them, you just keep moving. So when I first got here, that's the kind of mechanism that my body ran under. I was still living like, sort of like living in New York and not really being there.
And then, and so how long were you in Denver, and then what brought you to Boulder? and then, right, and KGNU was not broadcasting in Denver.
No, not at
the
that time,
yeah.
no.
So what brought you to Boulder?
I was in Denver for 3 years doing window display, and I always like to say I got wroth, and it opened my eyes, and I thought I can't continue doing this work that I do. Like at this time a year, Christmas, I would have decorated something like 500 Christmas trees in the stores. I would have wrapped like 1,000 boxes with nothing inside for fake presents. I wasn't the only one. There was a whole crew of us doing that. And we would go to all the other stores and put it around. My store was here. I used to be a Neusteter's here in Boulder. And I had the Boulder store. It was a small store. I came out by myself. I met people. I started going to dance classes here. Did African dance. I liked coming to Boulder to go to the concerts. I liked to come to Boulder for FACs, and then I decided, like, you know, this is crazy. And I got wroth here, and I said, like, I'm going to move to Boulder. You know, I don't need to be in Denver. Denver is not like New York. That was one of the first things I noticed, that Denver was sort of like, it's very much of a cow town. Everything closed at 6 o'clock. I didn't have really many friends other than the people that I worked with, and it just didn't rub me the right way. So I was having more fun in Boulder than I was in Denver. So I moved here, and I moved here, and I started listening on the radio to KGNU, and I thought, like, wow, they play music like back in New York. They're, you know, they're playing this forward music. They're talking about stuff that I'm interested in, and they were asking for help to move from the harvest, which is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What year was that? Do you remember? Exactly.
God, maybe it was 78. Because I moved to Denver in 75, so it was probably about 78.
Yeah, and I think that was the year. Yeah, the station had been operating in this very small cottage, owned by the
Harvest House.
Harvest House, is that what the hotel was called?
Yeah.
And they moved to.
The Aristocrat, over the Aristocrat.
Right, on Pearl Street.
Yeah.
On Broadway.
Yeah.
Somewhere near the downtown mall. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that must have been, I think it was 78, the year that, I don't remember exactly.
Time flies.
I'm not sure, right. Or was it later? But,
yeah. And one interesting.
Because actually, I'm not sure if actually 78 was the year that KGNU first went on the air. So it could be that KGNU first went on the air
in 78?
Around 78.
Well, they were at
so maybe it was a little later that they.
Well, didn't KGNU started as a class over at CU?
At the Boulder Free School.
Yeah, and that it was going, having a nonprofit radio station. How do you do it?
Yes, that was exactly, and it took years.
Yeah.
But finally it went on the air.
And then they were at the Harvest House, and then to the Aristocrat.
Yeah. And so, and you helped, so that was your first connection. They were looking for help to move.
They asked for help over the radio. I wish they'd do it now more often. Ask for help, but they just said that, hey, we got all these boxes here, we got all these albums, we need help moving out of here. If you can help, come on down. Just have a good time. So I thought, like, yeah, why not? That's a good way of meeting people. I'd been new to Boulder. The only people that I knew were people that I danced with. which was, that's not a huge number, but.
So where was the dance class?
We were all over. At that time, we could rent different places. There was a large mansion on Mapleton. It's still there at the top of the hill. And they had a huge ballroom upstairs. We had classes there. There used to be someplace, Rocky Mountain Joe's. Is there a place, Rocky Mountain, on the mall? See, I got here in Boulder just as the mall was open. The first year the mall had just opened. They had just done the mall. And the dance troupe was Jane Dundee's African dancers. At the time, I and another woman were the only black people in the troupe. So it was unusual. And that I had some great friends, a wonderful time dancing. We used to dance on the mall because people would come down, and there was no bustering license. You didn't need any license or anything. You can just go down there and perform. Things were a lot different. And Boulder was known as, in Denver used to call it Granola Land, because they were all health food stores and people out in the street. Basically, I thought people were just out just having a good time, just being themselves.
Yeah, and so you connected with KGNU to help with the move, and then how did that lead to further involvement?
I became more involved where I volunteered to answer phones, be a receptionist in the office. I did 2 terms on the board. A lot of, let's say, like, I don't know if we were so much big into tabling at that time. We really didn't. I don't think we tabled that much. But I remember the pledge drives, and there was just a lot of people there who were people to talk to. It'd be interesting to talk to, stuff like that. I'm not really a crock pot type kind of person, and that when I say that,
Right.
I've had lots of different jobs, and usually you're sitting around a table and it's break time, whatever, lunchtime, and the things that would come up was crock pot recipes, and I'm not that person. I'm not that person that at your Secret Santa you get a bottle of perfume. Somebody gives you, they think that I'm not that kind of person. That's not my personality. I don't know. I guess I look like that. I'm that kind of person, but I'm not. And I found a more diverse group of people who were interested in stuff that I was interested in. The politics, the music. And at that time I was doing a lot of dancing. I was really into dancing. So it was where I needed to be. And I was getting, feedback. I wasn't getting recipes. So it was nice.
And just to explain also that KGNU has a few staff people, and back then even fewer, I'm not sure how many, but so everything else, the on-air people helping out at the front desk as receptionists and whatever else had to be done was all volunteers.
Yeah, and it's still pretty much, it's the same thing. It's still mostly volunteers doing, I call them, jobs in the background. And for me, from my background of when I was in Kansas City, I was in the sculpture department. I transferred into the industrial design department. Then I went to Pratt, did industrial design. And my field of choice tended to be around working with teams, of having a crew. And so when I came out here, and I was in the display department, and there was a crew. And the transition over to, I did a lot of KGNU. I almost lived at the station. That people always say, "Oh, I remember you years ago. I was you know," and it's because I hung around the station so much. I needed that kind of energy of being with a group of people who sort of had the same idea that they were trying to get across. And KGNU sort of fit into my lifestyle.
Yeah, and it really is. I mean, that's interesting because it really is a community effort.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be here without a whole lot of volunteer input that creates this community to keep KGNU going.
Yeah, and another thing is, like, I might say, I don't want to say, I'm a typical New Yorker in the sense of being very, New Yorkers tend to be a lot more vocal about their opinions and their politics. People are always calling us provincial, but I don't think we're really that provincial. That I heard that so often in Missouri about being provincial.
I'm one of the people that say that, but if we get distracted and start talking about New Yorkers, we'll go on all day.
Yeah.
About being opinionated.
Yeah.
That was something I had to learn. Like, oh, people aren't like that out here. They don't just. So.
But at KGNU, they're like that. That's one thing I found that was like, this is the kind of energy that I was used to, people being really vocal about their opinions and not having to agree with stuff. And I had a good friend that doesn't live here anymore, but we used to get together and we call it venting. So, and her husband, Rick, would make meals and little drinks and bring stuff in for us, and he'd sit and he'd just listen to us vent, and we would be screaming, and it's just something that for some people is sort of a turn off and shocking, that when they see me in that mode that they can't believe it's me. But I get really passionate about stuff. And I'm used to being around passionate people. And like I said, I grew up in a house of women. And that kind of energy sort of comes out very, very passionate and being involved in your stuff. I came from a union family. I was taught you don't cross that line of people out there with picket signs and stuff. See what they're protesting, and then you don't go in that store. We got the, there was a union paper, and it actually was a communist paper, but that was a thing we would get every month. And all the unions got it in New York. I can't remember what the name of it is, but it was a communist newspaper. And this is the stuff that I saw hanging around the house. And this is the way I was brought up, to be able to voice your opinion. And you have to voice your opinion. You just can't stand by. My mom we lived on the 4th floor in an apartment building, and if she saw something down happening in the street that she didn't agree with, she'd throw the window up and she would be screaming at whoever was doing that down there in the street. You know, they got her opinion about what was going on. You just didn't get away with stuff. And that's how I grew up.
Yeah, well, I'm very interested to hear that, because I know when I moved out here, it took a while. And one day I realized when you shoot off, when someone says something, and then you shoot off your mouth to tell them, where you agree and disagree and how aggravated you've been about the issue for whatever, that people are not used to that. And,
no, they're not, and especially, and they're not used to it coming from a woman. And I think they're not used to it coming from a small black woman like me. And I've actually been told by my neighbors after they'd seen one of my explosions that, like, I always thought you were a lady. What the hell does that mean? I'm still a lady. I can't do that, you know.
Okay. Yeah, so that's very interesting, and it's very interesting for me also to hear, you know, there's a definite cultural difference. It took me years to realize, like, oh, actually the rest of the country is, I'm not in New York anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
yeah, because I just think it's like, I always grew up with ladies with cigarettes hanging out of the side of their mouth, and they're blah, 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 you know, and telling you about it. My grandmothers were like that. They were very vocal. One was from the South and one was from Barbados. One from Barbados was very much more vocal. I think that she was from Barbados, and I don't know if it was our family, whole island, or what, but they're a hell of a lot more vocal and argumentative than some of the people that I deal with here. And it might be just that New York. And like I say, I grew up with women. I keep saying that, but I feel sorry for my cousin, because he was the only male and he had to sort of be around that. And then I think later on, my brother, he grew up with basically just being around women, and he's got a silver tongue. He knows how to work his way around stuff, and I think it's from hanging around a lot of women. If you're a male, you have to learn how to talk with the females. And he certainly did.
Well, it's very interesting. All that stuff. So anyway, so you got involved with KGNU, feeling a little bit more comfortable in that cultural setting than
it was like New York. It was like I'd come home, and even nowadays I told people, they say, "Oh, you don't have any family here," and I say, "Oh no, but I got extended family at KGNU. I've got a lot of people there that I consider family, and it's like a family. You know, you get together, you have fun, you have arguments, you work together, and you're just in this community trying to accomplish stuff, and it's life."
Yeah. So, and so as far as your some of what your activities at KGNU, so you started like volunteering as the front desk receptionist, and then what else? And then at some point you became a member of the board for a couple of terms.
Yeah, for 6 years. And I was on committees, and actually for me, meetings and things like that, sort of, it's not my style. I'm more of a hands-on person. So I started doing events. So I helped. At some point, I did the book and record sale. I came the coordinator for that, and spent many a day over at Hoshimoto's upstairs, going through boxes and boxes of books. So.
I'm glad you mentioned. I just was there yesterday getting my car. We'll put in a little plug for Hoshimoto's. They would store all that stuff for the book and record sale.
Yeah, and at one point they told us we had to move out because the floor, the ceiling was starting to bow, and it's an old funky building. And all that stuff up there was not really a good thing.
Yeah,
so
books and records are very
really
heavy.
Yeah. So we had to find another place. I started the plant sale. At my mind, I'd like to call it the garden party. I just think of Rick Nelson and that song. I met Ozzie and Harriet when I was in Kansas City, Missouri. And they were the coolest couple. They'd come down, they were there for doing summer play, and I was working as a waitress in the Plaza Hotel, and they would come down, and every night they would have ice cream. Ozzie had this thing about having ice cream, so they'd have ice cream. And they were just so wonderful. They would love Boulder right now, and I'm talking about the weed. So they were just such a fun, they were just real people. It was just amazing because I said, like, my God, I grew up with you, watching you on TV. You know.
Who would think they'd actually be like real people?
Well, yeah, well, they had originally
great.
started, Ozzie was a conductor of an orchestra, and Harriet, she was a singer. You know, they hung out with musicians, so, and then they started doing the TV show.
Right. Hey, I do remember being in love with Ricky Nelson for quite a few years as I was growing up. Yeah, I think so, yeah.
So I think I still even have a napkin stuck away somewhere with their autograph on it. So it was just...
So that's fun. Oh, right, so the garden, right.
Yes, I started that's the garden party. Yeah, and
plant sale.
The plant sale, and we still do it. And I just think it's just a wonderful event because people, I love working in the garden. And it's funny because before I moved here, we were living out in Long Island, living in Brooklyn. Out in Long Island, we had a house and we had a yard, and I couldn't grow anything. I could put stuff in the ground. I don't know what it was. I just did not have a green thumb. I moved out here to Colorado, and bang, all of a sudden I can do it. And this is not an easy place to garden.
Yeah.
The climate is not really conducive to gardening because it changes so often, and
it's dry.
It's dry. Where I lived, what they would say about the soil is that every year you'd have a bumper crop of rocks because rocks just sort of come up out of the ground. They just heave up. So it's really a hard place to garden in. And I just thought, wow, this would be a great thing. I bet you a lot of people out there would donate plants to the station. You can't give money, but gardeners always have an overstock of seedlings. People with house plants. It's the recycle stuff. It's recycling. You know, you've got a house plant you don't want anymore. It's too big for your space. You don't like the way it looks anymore, or you cut it up and you've got all these little plants. So why not? It's free, it's easy, and it's fun.
Right. And so you can, instead of just throwing it away, you can help with KGNU.
Yeah. So I thought, yeah, well, no-brainer. And I did a master gardening extension program here in Colorado. I went through that, and we used to have plant exchanges. So I thought, like, hey, the station, we could do like a plant exchange, but we would get money, and they'd get the plants. So why not? It helps the station. And that's still going on. I'm still involved in that.
Yeah. What, do you remember when that started?
I don't even know how many years. I'm really bad with years and knowing how long I've done stuff. So it's sort of weird. I always liked the idea that I have been involved with KGNU exactly 1 year less than KGNU has been in existence. So that's easy for me. That's a no-brainer. But, Also makes me feel like, wow, I'm older than dirt at the station.
Nope.
There are some others who are there older than
That's
me,
right.
and you're longer
There
than me,
are.
but sometimes that's how I feel.
Yeah. Okay, so you got involved in a bunch of things, and then what made you decide to? Was there anything particular going on when you decided to see if you could be on the board? And actually, I'm not even sure how that process works.
No,
exactly.
at the time I was just asked,
Yeah.
would I be interested in being on the board, and I said, sure, why not? It was great. It was very. It was entertaining, except it made me realize I'm not really that kind of a go-to-meeting kind of person.
Yeah.
And at that time, the board meetings sometimes would go for hours. And I was
Yes.
still, yeah, I had been there where there had been a fist fight. People had thrown stuff at other people. It was sort of exciting in one way, but in another way, it sort of it put me to sleep to go to a board meeting. I have a really hard time. I've been at events and been right up there in the front row and just go passed out because I couldn't keep. And it wasn't from being bored as much as like my body makeup. I have to keep moving. It's necessary to keep me going.
So, but you were on for 2 terms.
Yeah.
So you stuck it out.
I stuck it out, and I was on the grievance committee, and that was part of, because at that time you had to be on another committee, so that was it. Mm-hmm. And it just seems to me that this continual involvement of how the station has evolved from where I started to where it is now. It's a lot like watching a child grow up. And I feel like a parent. And that it's necessary for me to voice my opinion and sometimes in ways give instruction. I'm there to give instructions. I'm not, I don't have any kids. I'm not married. I'm on my own. I live with a cat. And this, to me, sort of seems like it's part of my legacy. I feel like I've been involved long enough to consider this part of my legacy of what I'm leaving behind. And I think it's really important from my background, the way I've been brought up and raised, that people stay involved and be open and express your opinion. It's really necessary that people express their opinion. And KGNU, to me, I don't have a lot of money. I'm still on the bottom half of society of being, I don't feel poor, I feel very rich, but I don't have those green tickets. And KGNU makes it possible for me to give in a lot of ways that I can't give money, but I can give my time in keeping a venue open that touches so many different things that I believe in. That we are like a soapbox for a lot of different groups that don't have the ability to do it any other way, and we're putting out information. I think it's real important to put out information. I've been brought up, this is one thing I learned from being in industrial design, is that you have to learn about what you're dealing with. You have to continually keep educating yourself and being aware of your environment around you. The one thing I really appreciate, and I think is really important, I learned in industrial design, is that the importance of negative space. if you talk about negative space to people, they don't know what you're talking about. And this chair here, I'm positive space. All this around me is negative space, and it's part of our world. It's like being a fish in water. And we have to be aware about all this negative space that's around us, because it actually, you're part of a soup, you're a mesh. And KGNU seems to be doing that. We're putting out stuff that maybe people wouldn't ordinarily pay attention to.
So in other words, there is this kind of positive space
and the
output
yeah,
into
is that
the
everybody sees the
surrounding.
positive space. Everybody sees that. They know the material stuff, the hard stuff that's there. But it's the stuff that you don't really come across. It's the invisible stuff, maybe. It's the invisible stuff. It's there, but you're not really that aware of it.
It's the stuff you take for granted.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so what KGNU does is sort of asks questions about that, brings it into visibility.
Yeah, it's
maybe.
like me in music. I loved all kinds of music, and I don't know why. I just love all kinds of music. And KGNU puts that out there, and puts it out in such a way that when I listen, sometimes the DJ just starts talking about something insignificant, about the song, about the artist, or whatever, something that you didn't know about. You had no idea about, and to me, that's real special. I find that, like, it's always, you learn something, you listen, and like, oh, I didn't know that. And I've worked in places where I've had to listen to commercial radio, and to me it's assault on my intelligence. It's like being hammered over the head by either by the music, that you hear the same thing over and over again. And it might be a great song, it might be a great artist, but if you hear it 100 times a day, you're over it. And then they assault you with commercials about telling you to go out and spend and buy something you don't really need and you don't really have the money for. And if I'm going to put my money someplace, I'd rather put it someplace where I'm getting something up here. I'm getting some feedback, something working on my mind, making me think, and making me grow and progress, I hope.
Well, that kind of sort of covers the story where I wanted to take you about KGNU, and I think where the sort of timing is working out just about right. So now I want to ask you, is there, other stuff about KGNU or your life in general that you'd like to end the interview with, or anything I forgot to ask you?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Yeah.
But who knows? There's lots of stuff out there. I just right now I'm 65. I do a little work here and there. I try to do my artwork. I'm a salvage artist. I like to work with furniture. I also like to work with, I like fabrics. I used to work at Ferrell Reed, that was here in Boulder, and was a tie manufacturer, making men's ties and cummerbunds and tuxedo shirts and things like that. So that's me and things that I like to do. And the most continuing thread, it seems, since I've been here in Boulder, Colorado, and I'm seeing like I'm going to be here for a while, has been, besides my artwork, it's been KGNU. So it's real important to me that it's still feeding something in me. You know, I wouldn't be there at the station if I didn't have to, because I have lots of other things I could be doing. But there's something about KGNU that keeps drawing me in. In a lot of ways, it's feeding me and keeping me going.
Yeah. So it works both ways.
Yeah.
The volunteers help KGNU.
And KGNU helps volunteers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think for people, one thing I could say is like, hey, if you want to do something, go out there and volunteer at doing something, get involved in something that interests you and find more out about it. And especially like young people, because when you're young, you have all this energy and all this strength, and you are really looking at lots of stuff. You might not be really taking stuff in, but I always remember in high school I had a counselor who told me, because I didn't want to read something, I thought it was really boring and it didn't make any sense to me, and he said, "Don't worry, it'll kick in later."
Good advice. Well, I think we're about at the end of our time.
Well, it's good.
So is
Fine.
that good for you? Okay, so thanks a lot for sharing your thoughts with the oral history program.
Well, thank you. I'm glad you asked me to do it.
Great.